Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo with another video for you. And with this one, joining this trend that I believe was largely started by Vinyl Richie, and that is talking about the favorite or, best or most influential albums, of the year. And these have been great videos. He's been doing them. Others have kind of joined on that. So I'm going to join this concept, but a little bit differently, okay? Because I am your standard deviant. So anyway, I am going to focus on records that I actually had during these years. And I'm going to start with 1970 because that would have been the time that I began collecting records. So I would have been, that would have been the year that I was, 11, 12 years old. And I was starting to buy my own records. So I don't have very many to show because there were a lot of great records that were released in 1970. I mean, records that I have now that I love listening to, like Grateful Dead, American Beauty, or Neil Young, After the Gold Rush, or Derek and the Dominoes. But I did not have these records in my, own personal collection. Even with a record like Let It Be, which was released in the US in 1970, I was listening to that record, but I did not own it. It would have been somebody else's copy that I was listening to. Same with Creedence Clearwater Revival. There was a kid who lived down the street, and he had these records, and so I would listen to them, but I did not buy them. So I've got the few that I bought myself and was starting to build a, a collection. Many of the, excuse me for my, phlegmy voice, because 2 weeks ago I had COVID, and it's still lingering on. I mean, I'm not contagious. I'm over it, but and I got over it quickly because I'm fully vaxxed. I can't imagine what it would have been like if I wasn't. The first 2 days were pretty awful. But anyway, that's why I have this lingering nasal and some chest phlegminess, from that. So yeah, I'm going to be coughing and clearing my throat a lot. But anyway, I was listening to many of these records, and then also, I soon acquired them within the next couple of years. I just didn't have them the year that they were released. But one record I will start off with, and I'm pretty sure this was the first record I ever bought. And I mean, I still listen to it, on occasion because it is, to me, just an amazing, brilliant album. And that is Black Sabbath, their debut. This, with being an 11, 12-year-old kid, I'm not exactly sure when the record, this is a reissue. But, the whole creepy cover. And I can't remember what time of year, it was released, but I knew people were talking about it. I heard a few songs. Well, I don't know if I actually heard any songs from it. But, my peers, were talking about it. And so I bought it. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. It was the kind of record I guess I had associated, for a large part, well, listening to singles and things like that, and so records you sometimes think of as just a collection of singles. So you don't really get a complete concept, but there were a lot of like concept records that were coming out, and this was one of them, and it just really, really, it was so the guitar, Tony Iommi, in his guitar playing is just really, really amazing. And the songs, they were orchestrated. And, I was a music nerd kid. I was playing the saxophone, I was in the school band, I listened to classical music, and this was, really, really, really caught my ear. So yeah, this is probably everybody goes, oh, you always remember the first record you bought. I'm not 100% sure this was my first record, but I'm pretty sure it was. So yeah, Black Sabbath's debut. Now, another record that was released in 1970, which was one of the first records that I bought, and I still love. This is one of my favorite albums. And sometimes people say that, the first record of a band that you buy typically turns, or the first one that you listen to, typically turns into your favorite record of that band, even though it may not be the best one of their catalog, but it turns out to be your favorite because it was the first one you listened to. Well, this was not the first one I listened to, but it is the first one I bought, and that is Burnt Weenie Sandwich, the Mothers of Invention. And this is on the original Bazaar label, blue label. Yes, again, this record is, to me, absolutely amazing. You've got the two doo-wop songs at the beginning and at the end, which are the bread, so to speak, of the Burnt Weenie Sandwich, which was a fairly common meal that Frank would fix for himself while he was working, down in his studio. He would take a Hebrew Frankfurter and, hold it over the stove and, cook it till it was, good and burnt, and then slap it, in a piece of bread with some mustard, and, that was a meal. So, the Burnt Weenie Sandwich. But there's so many beautiful compositions on here, and as a 11 and 12-year-old, I'd listen to it, and then continuing in the years afterward, especially in my early teen years, I would listen to this record with my headphones, and it would be just a super enjoyable, relaxing experience. The whole record. I mean, at the end of side one, the closer ABC, it is just the way the piano kind of just like drifts off, at the end, and then the whole Igor's Boogie and the overture to Holiday. I love that. I just love that. I mean, I would actually, even though the origin of Holiday in Berlin is connected to a very negative experience Zappa and the Mothers had while performing in Germany, their show was, if I remember correctly, their show was nearly taken over by a bunch of radical anarchists and communists in the audience who were trying to disrupt the show. That's why, you've got the line in here where he's speaking to some hecklers in the audience, and he's telling them, "Stop it! You'll hurt your throat." That's what it was all about. But anyway, I would listen to this, actually dreaming like about a holiday in Berlin. It just absolutely beautiful music, wonderful, and was listening to it a lot. Now this next one. My brother had King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King. And I listened to that record just, all the time. Some friends of mine too, we loved listening to it. Being kids, we would, kind of joke about some of the instrumentation of how it sounded like gerbils running around, or that's what it made us, think of. But I did buy their next release, In the Wake of Poseidon, which is very similar in some respects with In the Court of the Crimson King. You've still got Sinfield, with them writing music, and there's a few songs in which you still have Greg Lake, doing vocals. But it's another record too where, except for the spine, and this I believe is an original, has no writing on it until you get into the inside. Then we have the track listing and lyrics, which you can barely read because it's silver lettering. But so this was one also that I bought at that time and listened to I listened to it a lot, not only because I really enjoyed it, but at that time, I mean, you can tell I just didn't have a whole lot of records that were my own. So, In the Wake of Poseidon, then my first Led Zeppelin record, Led Zeppelin 3, that I bought on my own. And for a long time, and I still vacillate as to whether this is my favorite Led Zeppelin release or, is the Runes album or Led Zeppelin 4 my favorite release. So I go back and forth on that. But this, again, another record that I would listen to a lot. And songs that really, the song Since I've Been Loving You, just an absolute brilliant song, remains one of my favorites. And then also, Gallows Pole and Tangerine and That's the Way. I mean, side 2 really was, probably my favorite side. I would listen to that, probably over and over more often than I would listen to side 1. But nonetheless, it's among my favorite albums of that time, and also more often than not, I'm going to cite it as my favorite Led Zeppelin album. Excuse me. Now, this one also shows that, I was listening to a lot of different things. And this was a record that I bought at that time, when it was released. And that is Cat Stevens, Tea for the Tillerman. And, this is just, again, a wonderful album that I loved at the time and still love now. The song, of course, Where Do the Children Play? Oh man, just so many great songs on here. Father and Son, and Wild World. Some of these songs I believe were on the Harold and Maude soundtrack, which I have that too. But anyway, yes. So Tea for the Tillerman is one that I purchased at that time and was, in my collection. So now, I mentioned that, I was sick, and, I mean, if you don't want to listen to me talk anymore, I'm not going to talk about records anymore. That's fine. But I did want to kind of respond to the whole thing that's been going on with Neil Young and Spotify. It's really kind of interesting to see reaction, to what he's done in removing his catalog from Spotify, and which personally I applaud what he's doing. But I saw there was, on Facebook, there was a Rolling Stone article that apparently he's kind of trying to walk back what he did, or he's trying to explain his actions with, I'm not trying to censor, and then there was this comment that was saying, Neil, this is censorship, and I'm like, no, it's not censorship, okay? It's not what the First Amendment is about. The First Amendment protects our freedom of expression from infringement by the government. All right? If a business wants to infringe my speech, they can do that. If I want to tell you someplace, that I don't want to listen to what you're saying, shut up, go away, I can do that. It's not an infringement on your First Amendment right. It is only an infringement when the government does that. So when Neil decides that, it's either in my catalog or, the highway, if you don't get rid of Joe Rogan. And Spotify is a business. They can make their own decision. And Joe Rogan's got a lot of followers. And he, that's a lot of revenue for Spotify, okay? And I'm just quickly checking some, yeah. So they made their decision. Okay, Neil, you want to do that? Fine. We'll remove your catalog from our, playlist, because the bottom line is Spotify's a business, It's if I own a bar, a tavern, let's say, and I've got a stage in my tavern, for live acts. If somebody just walks in off the street and gets up on my stage and starts doing something, whatever, regardless of the content of what they're doing, and I don't want them doing that, I can throw that person out. I can stop them because, and I'm not going to be violating their First Amendment right. Okay? But as that same business owner, if I have a performer come in that is doing something that is maybe anti-government or anti-local something or whatever, and the city comes in and says, you need to shut this down or we're removing your license, that is censorship. That is infringing upon mine and that person's, First Amendment right, because it's becoming an act of the government. And this it's kind of sad that Neil has this feeling that he needs to walk back or re-explain, his actions. He doesn't, but that's what happens in in news media and things like that. I mean, this whole situation made me think of Thomas Jefferson, who, he was not a religious man. And a lot of people have this notion that our founding fathers were all these God-fearing, religious people. And most of them were not. And if they weren't outright atheists, they were agnostic. And Thomas Jefferson made the famous quote regarding other people's beliefs. His response was, what does it matter to me whether a man prays to one God or many gods? It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. And when he said that, boy, I tell you, the puritanical press in New England went after him because he was wanting to be president. He was going to be running for president. So he started to try and walk back what he said with that. So this kind of stuff goes on all the time. The bottom line was, Neil Young and what he did, and he's been joined by others like Joni Mitchell, that's not censorship because they decide to make that decision. Okay? I mean, another example of censorship, there's this mayor down in Mississippi who is threatening the public library in the city that if they don't get rid of all their LGBTQ content, he's going to withhold funding for the library. Now, that funding comes from taxpayers, okay? So this is an infringement on the First Amendment where they're trying to, this government official is trying to coerce this change in the public library. That's my take on this whole, Neil Young thing. Personally, I agree with what he's doing. He's certainly getting on XM radio now because his catalog is moving there. And, it's just, if you're going to accuse people of censorship, even in the case with Frank Zappa and how the record company and some of they tried to remove certain lines and words and things like that. When Warner Brothers was doing that, it wasn't censorship. They were editing his material against his will. All right. But this was a business issue. But the PMRC, that whole situation, that was people trying to use the government. All right. And so that was, approaching censorship if it was not censorship in, an outright case. It's, whatever. That's my position and that's my take with Neil Young. I support what he's doing. And to me, he's not infringing on anybody's right. Neither is Spotify, okay? It's not censorship. So there you have it. Hope you, leave a comment in the down under. And remember, if I don't like your comment, I can get rid of it. And I'm not infringing on your First Amendment right, okay? I'm not. If I block your content or block your comment, I'm not violating your First Amendment right. So there you go. Pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.